Back in my day, there was this thing called the Rubik's Cube. It was a puzzle that you twisted and turned to get all the colors to one side and to make a beautiful pattern where all the colors aligned. And it seemed like no matter how you twisted or turned, it would just lead to utter frustration and seemed impossible to solve. It seemed like almost that you needed to be a magician and have a magic trick to do it. However, what you discovered was that there was a pattern, that there was a system into doing it. And once you learned that pattern and system, it would take you mere seconds to solve. And you would never have to use anything else to do it. It could be jumbled as much as possible, and still, if you use the system, you'll solve it. In writing, there's something similar called the 3-act structure. The 3-act structure is a system that's designed to help you tell your story. Most stories, if not all, have a 3-act structure. It's the how you get to the 3-act structure that's the interesting part in writing, because not everybody does it the same. There are many methods that you can use to get to the 3-act structure, and that is what this show is about, as we take a look at how you develop your own 3-act structure that works for you.
Hi, I am Megan Morgan, and this is...
Oh, me. I'm Eric Christopher Myers.
We are #MeKM. I'm a writer. He's a filmmaker.
I make movies. I make movies on a dying form called physical media. But you can also find my films, Butterfly Kisses and Roulette, on Amazon Prime streaming.
They're both really good. Butterfly Kisses is great this time of year if this is filming in October, because it's a great Halloween movie. It's very scary. Yes, it is. And I write novels. The one that I have right now is called The Altered Wake, and I'm working on getting out the second in that series, The Altered Rise. I write books about badass female characters in science fiction and fantasy.
She does. I agree.
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I write primarily novels. I also dabble in comics, and I have written a couple of screenplays for some smaller films. And this year I did my first couple of straight-to audio scripts, which was a nice experiment.
Hi, I'm Debra Parmley, and I write, lots of things. I'm most known for writing military romantic suspense, and started getting a little more into fairy tales this year. And so you'll be seeing in 2021, you'll be seeing the fantasy novel that I'm going to finish. Lots of stuff.
Hello, everyone. My name is OKUBO, OKUBO Films. I make films. This is my premiere full feature film that I did this year. I'm also a writer. My two favorite books are Love and Kaoru and Love's Shadow. I do have fantasy as well. And this year I'm planning to make a comic book. I'm doing an animated movie, and I'm finishing the line. And I have written quite a few screenplays thanks to Joe. Joe is the one that shifted me on the track because I had a screenplay that was just sitting there.
We're talking about the dreaded first 10 pages of our work. It's a trope unto its own self in reality. I mean, there is so much that you could say about the first 10 pages and what it should be, what it is, how it matters. And so I'm curious to start out to talk with this group here. How much emphasis do you place on the first 10 pages? Is it the paramount for you? Is it the thing that you concentrate on the most when you are looking to put this thing out there? Is that I realize that we all write and then we write it out and then we don't worry about anything when we're writing it out. But when we go back, is that the thing that you spend the most time on?
When I am editing, I think that I probably do spend the most time editing that first section. And usually that involves chopping away all of the excess flesh and meat and sort of getting that pacing really fast and getting things to sort of unravel really, really quickly. And if you don't hook someone in those usually that first page, even that first line is incredibly critical for getting a reader's attention, because there are so many things that are competing for their attention. There always have been. There are more now than ever, especially since I know that I, as a writer anyway, that the first 2 or 3 chapters are usually where I'm finding my own feet for the story. And so there's usually a lot of extra fat for me in the first 2 or 3 chapters. And usually the first 2 chapters, I just cut entirely. And then I'll start in like what was originally chapter 3. And then, just sort of hone everything down as much as possible. So yes, I think that they're really important. They're major focusing in editing, less so in the writing. I'm going to be contradictory here, just from what I've pitched and what I've been told from the industry in film, not in novels. In novels, I'm self-published, but in film, the first 10 pages are throwaway. Basically, I've been told everything for action films, you want to put basically the big explosions, the biggest action scenes in the first 10 pages because you want them to fly by. Because whoever's going to be producing your film, as soon as they get past those 10 pages, if you can get that done in under 30 seconds, if they're like, wow, they feel the pacing is flying in the film. And not just that, because in production of a film, whatever you turn in as a screenplay, whatever they buy, most likely 10, 20, 30 revisions later is what's going to be made. So those first 10 pages is just to get you to sell the screenplay, and you want it as fast and as less detailed as possible because you want them to feel as flying by. Now, I failed this quite a few times because I like to write my film a certain way. But again, when it comes to film screenplays, if you're pitching it and you're selling it, you need to get them past those first 10 pages. And there's a great book called Writing Movies for Fun and Profit. And it's one of the ones that actually is closest to what actual producers in the industry want. And they'll tell you right there, like they've submitted screenplays where it's 1 word per the first 10 pages, right? And it's just like one actual word of dialogue. The rest is just like there was an explosion, then page 2, the fire came crashing through. So the first 10 pages in a screenplay for pitching are not as important as how you pitch the film.
Do you think that also has to do with the fact that a lot of times the first few minutes of a movie has credits, other things popping up that are distracting anyway? So you're not really into the story there because there are all these things popping up distracting people.
Oh, yes. I totally agree with you right there. And the issue with that is not just the credits. They're looking at the first, have you guys ever seen a trailer and nothing from the trailers in the film? Mm-hmm. Because those are the first 10 pages. And they filmed those to try to grab the audience because it has the flashiest stuff. It can be done really quickly. There's very little dialogue, and there's very, very little main cast and plot development. So that gets all thrown into that trailer, and then the rest of the film is worked around not having to worry about those first 10 pages.
Well, let me ask you a question, Jin, directly about, because you have made your own films. You haven't had to get them produced or put them into Hollywood.
I wasn't lucky enough.
With your own films,
do
you concentrate on the first 10 pages more so than with a film that you're trying to sell?
Oh, I did. With 2 films, I did. My first 2, my experimental film Box and my secondary film. With my short, once I started getting a cast together, the first 10 pages became more about wanting to set the scene rather than caring about dialogue. The opening stuff, right? It just was trying to build that location up. And it's not by choice, it's by location. And the reason is because I'm in Japan and I'm trying to film a movie as if it takes place in the US. So I'm trying to get that setting right, and that's where those first 10 pages become really difficult for me. For one thing, like when I'm driving down the street and I'm filming that scene, I can't reverse the screen and get the cars on the right side of the road to fit in the US, right? So that's why that's what I use my first 10 pages for. That's where I focus my energy on those 10 pages to try to set the screen to make the viewer feel we're in the Midwest US.
I think that anything that shows up on the page, particularly when you're writing for screen and you only have approximately 1 page per minute, everything is absolutely essential. And, you know, the rule is that you're supposed to see more white on a page than black. And never is that more true than with screenwriting, which needs to read very, very, very quickly and have as little description as possible. And in that case, the training that becomes necessary for a screenwriter is very, very different for, you know, being a novelist or any, you know, lengthy, you know, severely long form of storytelling, because it is a commitment to get a reader to sit down and read something that's going to take, you know, days and weeks and months or what have you. And the rhythms of the storytelling can be in such a way that it is going to keep them entertained like an entire season of a TV show. There's going to be the, you know, the built-in cliffhangers throughout that lead you to the next segment and keep you reading. But when it comes to film, theoretically, it's a 90-minute to 2-hour experience, or, you know, 3 hours if we're talking Lord of the Rings or something like that. It is a finite amount of time, and thus, if you are writing 1 page per minute, you can't have anything in that script that is not 100% necessary, because otherwise, if you are writing something that you know is not going to be playing on the big screen or streaming services, because it's 2020 now, then it's not there. That you don't even waste an executive's time. You don't waste a script reader's time, because there are people who are specifically paid to receive that package, open it up, and first of all, throw it in the trash if you use Times New Roman or something for the font, or the formatting is not, you know, what comes out of Final Draft. But also, they're going to start looking at it, and you are going to be lucky if you get them to read the first 10 pages. You're lucky. Oftentimes, they'll get through the first page and throw that shit away. They'll go, this person's writing like they're, you know, they're Paul Thomas Anderson, and they're describing every camera move or whatever it is. There are people who you're lucky if you get 10 pages. And so those 10 pages are the most important 10 pages of your screenplay.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I do. I agree with you completely. The issue is not trying to get someone to write in the idea that the first 10 pages don't mean anything. The idea is to write those first 10 pages to set a good high pace for your screenplay. You still can't sit there and go like, oh, I'm just going to write 1 word for the first 10 pages and have the person read 1 word per page. That's not going to work. You have to write a screenplay, and your first 10 pages have to fit. When a producer takes those first 10 pages and says, this cannot be put in the movie because this is too high budget, but we can shoot something similar to it and make it into the trailer. That has been told to me directly by multiple studios. Now, as an indie filmmaker, those first 10 pages for me have to set my scene. Like I said earlier, they have to set my tempo for my film that I'm making. And when we go, and like, I haven't approached indie film studios because the people that I've talked to have always been like, oh, that's nice. Oh, you have a screenplay. That's nice. I'm too busy right now. I don't have any time or finances to make other people's films. That's why I started OKUBO Films, to make films. Because when you get told no by even, you know, some people in the indie field, right? Either you shut up or cook, and I decided to cook.
Well, certainly with when you're writing a novel, the first 10 pages are very important, because when a reader picks up a book, you know, the first thing they do is they look at the cover, they look at the back cover, they open it up and they read part of page 1. That's what you have to hook them with. And if they don't get something out of that first page, then it's a good chance they'll put the book back and go on to the next book. So those early pages are very important for the reader. They're also important when you're dealing with editors and agents and all that as well. But, you know, as an indie guy, most of my stuff, the stuff that I do on my own, you know, my focus is going straight to the reader. Whereas when I work for publishers, my focus is, you know, do what they want, the company wants. So I go into those things knowing, you know, who my audience is. And in the case of working for publishers, my first audience is the publisher.
even before I had a book contract, I had attended the Antioch Writers Workshop, and one of the speakers there was Noah Lukeman, who is a big name agent. He was at a couple big publishing houses before that. He's been big in publishing, but anyhow, he was there speaking, and he was promoting his new book, and the title was The First 5 Pages. And he told everyone he never reads past the first 5 pages. So before I even got a contract, I knew I needed to write really good sentences for the first 5 pages to get to get past the gatekeeper, to get them to read on. But if you really think about that, that is what your reader does. Your reader comes, they pick up the book, they might look at the back first, or they might just jump right in, and they're going to read the first page. They might not get past the first page. So it makes a lot of sense the first pages have to grab whoever your audience is. You have one impression, the first impression, and that's it. And if you lose it there, you don't get it back. So there's that. And then the contest that launched my career, the American Title Contest, had categories. And they had 10 of us competing for one publishing contract with Dorchester. And the very first category was the first line. So it's not just the first 10 or 5 pages, it's the first sentence, the first line. And all of these different places are places where you either grab your reader, whoever they are, or you lose them. So I'm a firm believer in making those first pages as strong as I possibly can.
And that first line thing, like, I feel like that's not just now, like it is really important now, but you'll see throughout, the course of literature, there are so many novels that like the first line is something that will just stay with you forever, because that has always been so critical to grabbing the reader. Is you can, if you write a really, really excellent first line, which it is a skill in and of itself, you can give them the tone, the time, the place, characterization in a single sentence. But there are a few like really, really amazing standouts, but this is something that, this is not just now getting the attention of the modern audience. Like even Jane Austen comes out in her novels with incredible, funny, witty first lines. She brings her A game to the table from the very beginning.
You know something? I feel like Debra is sort of the embodiment of this, because the entire time she was talking, I was looking at the graphic behind her, which says "Spreading Love, One Story at a Time," and that's a great slogan. But if you really want to wow them, I was reading that and I completely misread it, and I thought it said "Spreading Love, One Stigmata at a Time," and I think that should be the thing.
And to your point, Megan, I would argue that film is just the same way. I mean, to me, the most iconic opening scene in any movie is the line that I'll never forget as long as I live, and that is, "I believe in America. America built my fortune." And that's from The Godfather, if anybody didn't know that. But
that's a great one.
On the screen. It is completely black, and you just hear that line, and that's how the movie opens.
I think the tricky thing is with these first sentences that, especially beginning writers, try to put too much in. They're trying to give backstory, or they're trying to give details. They're putting too much in. And I've been teaching classes for a while, and the book I use for the example for that has no backstory in my first chapter. None. I jump right in. I go into the heroine's point of view, and she's strung up over a mine shaft. The rope is breaking, and the cowboy's riding down the hill and sees her. That's the first time he sees her, and that's the opening. I give no backstory. And the first sentence is, "Pain erased all sense of time." So my hope when I wrote that was that I put enough in there to pull them in and to ask those story questions. Why? What's going on? which is what you want to do with these first pages. You want to somehow get them to wonder what's happening, what's next.
Yeah, it's the best of times and the worst of times,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
There are people who know what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
There are people out there who have never read that book, but they know the opening lines.
The other thing that's important about the first 10 pages is introducing us to the person you want us to know, right? And so the main characters become paramount in these first pages. And when you go back and you look at what you've written that first time or through, is that the first thing you're looking for? How did I introduce this character? Is there something specific that you need to make sure you come across in at least that first page or maybe the first couple pages?
The character's humanity has to be done for me in the first 10 pages, because whatever they're going to do later on, whatever they're going to accomplish, if I don't show them as being just like let's talk about, I'm going to switch from my screenplays to my novels. If I don't show the frailty or the broken part or the actual fact that this person is human and alive in the first 10 pages, then I can't have them do something later on if I'm going to have them break down again. Because if I want to make that connection with the reader, saying like, okay, I'm dealing with someone here who is basically just like the guy next to me or someone across the street. I know someone like this in my life, right? And everyone knows someone like someone else, right? So we have to, in my opinion, I have to show that in the first 10 pages. If I don't, then I have to rewrite the entire thing.
For me, my writing process, I'm a pantser, so I write my way into the story. So what you'll see in the final book is not usually the first chapter when I'm writing it. I may carve out the first 3 chapters and look at it and go, okay, I was getting to know my character here, but now at the end of chapter 3, I know this character. And then I look at that and I say, okay, here's where we're diving into story, where I want the reader to dive into story. And all that other stuff, I carve it out and then I trickle it in if I feel like they need to know any of that stuff that I wrote before. So.
I'm with Debra on this completely. I feel like that's almost precisely my process when it comes to the writing. And ERIK has had to read my first draft, so he knows this. The first 2 chapters are usually just fluff, and they just have to go.
Sam, I'm kind of it depends on the story I'm telling. Sometimes I open focused on the main character. Sometimes I focus on the event that leads into the story that the main character comes into. Like I write a lot of crime thrillers, so sometimes you start with the crime. So that opening chapter, the main character may not even be in it. It's showing the crime. So it just depends on the story. But no matter how I start one, it always starts with a character, whether that character is the main character or in some cases, like it could be the first victim. I want you to know that person before I kill them. Yeah. So, you know.
You know, we concentrate so much on these first 10, 15 pages. Is it a matter of you taking that pacing and pushing it all the way through? Or is that a different animal altogether, and then you're working on the other half of it?
I think, at least for me, the first 10 pages usually happen at the end of the writing. So I'll go through, I'll finish, and then I'll come back and I'll chop down what needs chopped down at the beginning. And that's when, after I have found the tone and the arc of the novel, that's when I really establish and set firmly those first 10. So it's more like the rest of the novel influences those first 10 rather than the other way around. And you sort of base the pacing of that first section off of what you as the writer already know is coming next.
I try to keep a flow, and I try to keep voice is important. It depends what character's head I'm in, but I try to keep that consistent throughout the novel. One thing I do, though, beyond the first chapter, or actually the first 3 chapters, because back in the day, that's what you would submit to the gatekeepers, was the first 3 chapters and your synopsis. So those had to really shine. So beyond that, I look at the end of each chapter. I take that sentence and I ask myself, would I put the book down at this point, or would I turn the page to the next chapter? So mine are specifically set up to keep the reader turning to the next chapter. And I've gotten emails from readers about that. And they may not know what I'm doing, but yeah, I'm doing that on purpose, you know.
For filmmakers, it's so much more different in terms of pacing, even though you write the entire screenplay one time, and you write it out, but you don't film it that way. Where the story really takes a voice and a shape is in the editing. And sometimes that changes how the screenplay is. It's usually just a blueprint, what they call it, right? And so it just enables you to give you the idea of what you're going to shoot, and then you kind of develop it and you change it constantly in the edit. And so in that manner, do you guys not even concern yourself with the pacing at that point? You just shoot what you've already written and then try to figure it out, or and try to get as much as you can before that, so that during the shooting, so that you have other stuff to connect to? Or are you worried about that when you're writing the screenplay?
There are so many famous examples of movies that have been remade in editing, essentially. And there's the equally old adage that if you give 10 different editors the same footage, they're going to produce 10 completely different films or scenes even from that footage. And I think that it comes back to what genre is it that you're working in. You can write and you can rewrite and rewrite until your hand falls off when it comes to a screenplay. But the fact is that when you are on set, the likelihood is very strong that there will be deviations. Those deviations can be in the dialogue. They can be in the entire meaning of the scene. The entire scene can get thrown out and you don't even end up filming it. But regardless, you've done another draft when you shot that film. And then when you're sitting there in the editing bay, you're going back and you're continuing to rewrite the same story. It's all in your editing selections. It's all in what you keep, what rhythms you establish. You can make a scene tense by adding in more time between dialogue. You can make something snappier by cutting the time out between breaths. I mean, there's so much that you can do in that final pass, and that's really what editing is. So in a way, it's almost like it kind of doesn't matter what you've written, because you're going to end up finding other ways to shorten it, change it, and alter its meaning.
The actor was going to take that and interpret it their own way as well, right?
And that is that because filmmaking is collaborative in a way that other forms of writing are not, other people are going to, they're going to bring their own spin on whatever it is that you're trying to convey.
When I made my own films, yeah, I do give my actors a certain freedom to build a character, but there is that sense of, this is my film. It has to accomplish my dream of what I'm trying to make. And what came out was not the screenplay that was written. I had to do a lot of dialogue changes, location changes, and I filmed an extra, give or take, 5-6 hours of footage for the 1 hour film that came out. And that the editing wasn't so much cutting stuff out, it was trying to preserve my story that I wanted to tell a certain way.
With something on film, you have movement and photo, and the video, and you can add music to. You can set an audience's the tone with the music. With comics, the art and the color can help set a tone that the writing doesn't have to. So you have to understand what method you're working in, and if you understand that, you know what you can play with. Writing a novel, you have to describe them differently, which usually means being a lot more wordy, that you would not have to be in those other instances, because there is the visual to help tell that story.
Military romantic suspense?
Yeah.
That is like the coolest thing in the world.
I love it.
3 words I never would have heard.
Well, it's funny because
of one another.
I started out in 2008. My first book came out. It was a Western historical romance. So I've always loved putting gunfights in my romances, and you could pull the romance out of my stories and you'd still have a story. So mine are kind of genre straddling, you know.